We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast are at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Your Health is Your Choice, right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I am your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Dr. Ernst von Schwarz. I may not be pronouncing it properly, so injustice if I am. We're going to be talking today about stem cell therapy, about your health, your beauty, your anti-aging breakthrough. How does the stem cell therapy work? What is it all about? How does it make you reverse aging? How does it benefit us? He's a cardiologist, but he has stepped into really kind of looking at what the stem cell therapy does for our bodies, minds, hearts, souls, spirits, because it's all combined here. And he says in our current healthcare system, physicians perform reactive medicine, which means diagnostic testing and pharmaceutical therapy is aimed at improving symptoms that occur secondary to damage of loss of function. Regenerative medicine, on the other hand, aims to repair damaged tissue, restore functional or reoccurring to the body's self-healing properties. With our aging bodies, and we're all aging folks if we're lucky, we do lose the regenerative power of stem cells. Stem cell therapy has the ability to particularly induce regenerative of accurate, injured, or chronically damaged tissue. In fact, most clinical studies show that stem cell therapy for different conditions have shown beneficial results like little adverse events, unlike the pharmaceutical therapies. However, stem cell therapy outside the frame of ongoing clinical trials is not FDA approved and it's not considered experimental. So what is stem cell therapy? We've heard all about it. It's been all over the news. People are talking about it, but we don't really understand what it is. Before we look at the benefits, what is the stem cells?
First of all, thank you, Sarah, for having me on. I appreciate that. And your pronunciation was excellent.
Oh, good.
Well, stem cell therapy is probably one of the most important discoveries in modern medicine, even possibly more than the finding of tuberculous bacilli or the development of antibiotics. So this is really a game changer. It changes the paradigm of medicine, in my opinion. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. So that's the future, because as you mentioned, we are going to shift from reactive medicine to regenerative medicine, where we want to repair rather than just react to damage.
Yeah, no more Band-Aid. Let's get to the root of the problem.
Exactly. So what is stem cell therapy? Well, stem cell therapy, as you mentioned, Sarah, is not FDA approved. So we are talking about something new, something experimental, which is used mainly in the frame of clinical trials right now with enormous, very impressive results in whatever condition you look at, from hair loss to heart failure to diabetes, you name it. So the stem cell therapy, the concept behind is basically to use the resources of our body, but to stimulate them, because especially as we age, we lose stem cells in quality and quantity. Keep in mind, stem cells are the units which are responsible to build an entire organism when we are born, right? So ideally, over the years, the stem cells' job is to repair any damage. And I remember a lecture many, many years ago by a very famous pathologist, Hans Popper, was a professor of medicine at Columbia University, who basically stated that you could take the liver of a 90-year-old person and transplant that one into a child, and the child would probably do well. So why is that? At that point, when I heard that lecture, which was 1987, nobody knew exactly why, but now we know the liver hardly ages unless there's cirrhosis or an infection like hepatitis or cancer, but it doesn't age like the heart or the brain. because of the abundance of stem cells.
Mm.
So if we have abundant stem cells in certain organs, why don't we have it in our skin, in our heart, in our brain, for example? We don't. So, but we have the potential. And what we do in stem cell therapy, we basically give stem cells from the outside exogenously, either into the systemic circulation or sometimes in a certain portion of the body, like a knee joint or into the liver or wherever it's needed. And the exogenous application of stem cells does the same what the original stem cells are supposed to do, which is repairing damage. How do they do that? There's basically 3, if not 4, different hypothetical mechanisms. Number 1 is those stem cell applications create what we call angiogenesis, meaning the buildup of new blood vessels. And wherever we need repair, we need blood vessels. We need oxygen and energy.
Mm-hmm.
Without blood vessel supply, oxygen supply, it doesn't work.
Right.
So that's angiogenesis, number 1. Number 2 is those cells are what we call anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
They fight inflammation. So if there's a heart attack, there's inflammation. If there's arthritis in the knee, there's a local inflammation. So stem cells are anti-inflammatory, and that's the reason why they help with the pain, with the symptoms. Number 3, they have at least some degree of what we call regenerative power. So they are supposed to repair damaged tissue. We showed that almost 20 years ago in experimental animal studies. If we give stem cells in a heart after heart attacks, we can reduce the scar tissue because stem cells in part can rebuild cardiomyocytes, meaning heart muscle cells.
Right.
Some people think, well, that's more stem cells make the healthy tissue stronger, but we believe there's at least some degree of regeneration, not a complete regeneration, but some degree. And lastly, the last point is that exogenous applied stem cells stimulate our own stem cell production to build more stem cells. So that's the mechanisms behind all the clinical studies.
I mean, everything wears out over a period of time. And the more abuse that we put on the body, diet, stress, anxiety, environment, it's going to wear us down even quicker. And we're seeing exponential amount of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, a great deal more of that, which is a lot to do with lifestyle, but also a very, very stressed society. And that stress really does wear us down even quicker, doesn't it? So if we can slow the process down or regenerate certain parts of the muscle, the tissue, the oxygen, the energy in the body, then it's just going to help our body to sustain ourselves at a more optimum level.
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, that's a concept behind what people call the anti-aging movement or anti-aging management or medicine, which is not that scientific, but on the other hand, I mean, just look at where I am. I live in Los Angeles. So, I mean, what do you think? Why all the Hollywood celebrities look so flawless, beautiful on the red carpet and in front of the camera? I mean, they come to us, honestly, cannot give you names, but it's obvious. And we inject them into the face, for example, and that revitalizes the face. So the superficial layers of the epithelial cells, the dermatocytes in the skin, are revitalized, and after a few days, they glow, the face glow, they look 10 years younger. So there is something to it, the anti-aging effects basically of stem cells, absolutely. Plus, the other thing to keep in mind is there is a reason, Sarah, why Google, Apple, Amazon, the biggest companies in the world, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, they all spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the last years into stem cell therapy, because we all believe that with the appropriate research activities, we probably will be able to prolong life within the next few decades. People might be able to live to 120, 150 years, if not more. I'm not talking about immortality. I'm talking about prolongation of health span here by use of two methods, basically. One is regeneration using stem cells in the future. And the other one is manipulation of the genetic processes of senescence, cellular aging, basically.
Can you explain that a little bit more in more layman terms so we understand that
So
better?
the cells in our body, they age. Every cell has a lifespan of a certain period, and that's predetermined. And there's different forms how cells die, three in fact. One is what we call necrosis, where cells over time just get weaker, their cell membranes rupture and the cells just goes downhill. The other one is what we call apoptosis. That's a predetermined cell death. And the last one is called autophagy. That would go too far for the lay people. But we know about the cellular and biochemical processes leading to these forms of cell death. And in the laboratory, in the research lab, it's possible nowadays to manipulate those biochemical and cellular processes to, I won't say prevent aging, but at least to inhibit the aging processes.
Slow it down.
To slow it down. We can do that in cell cultures already. We can do that in rodent animal models and have animals living 40% longer. So why shouldn't we be able in a couple of years to do that in humans too? And I think we will.
I mean, everybody's been looking for that, magic pill that, gives us that extra long life. And actually, in theory, we're meant to live. I mean, we can and quite capable of living beyond 100. And when we even look at the lifespan of people today, people are still being extremely productive in their lives in their 80s and their 90s. I mean, look at Betty White, for instance, right? Just short of a 100th birthday there. And it's extremely possible, but we put an awful lot of pressure on our bodies with the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we live our life. And there's a lot of mindfulness that has to go in there. Do you think the stem cell therapy is going to be something that can be used with people that still choose to live a fast living life? Or is it really something that we have to use in balance of the way our diet, managing our stress and everything else? Is it one of those aids that's going to be a part of helping us optimize our life, or it can replace that other things that we do?
No, I don't think it will replace anything. I mean, you're absolutely right, Sarah. It is more than there's no magic pill.
Right.
A lot of our aging processes and our outcomes actually have to do with lifestyle.
Yes.
And we all, and I'm sure you have heard about the blue zones, for example, those pockets in the world where people live way beyond 100 years. And they have certain characteristics which are similar in all of them. And one is, of course, they're physically very active till high ages. Interestingly, they don't go to the gym.
No, just lifestyle activity, right?
They do activities. They walk a lot. They don't drive. They do everything per foot, basically. So they are physically active. Number two is, of course, a balanced, mainly plant-based diet, rather than really a processed food intakes, but a balanced diet, rich in vegetables, fresh food, salads, and so on. Less meat, more fish products. The third thing is, of course, an active lifestyle in a social network. So those people have a purpose, even at the age of 95 or so, they still have a task within their social communities and are active in that. So these are the main determinants of a long life, actually, compared to living solely depressed in a little apartment without any social contacts, which is a determinant for early death. Moreover, keep in mind that age or advanced age is the number one risk factor for death. And so far, the only way to prevent aging is to die young, which we really don't want. Right? We want to prevent aging by being active and by repairing what has been damaged. And lifestyle, diet, exercise, and so on plays a major role in addition to what we try to achieve now using regenerative therapies.
Mm-hmm. So it's another skill and tool that we can use in order to optimize our lives. But there is that balance that we need to have in every other aspect of our lives. You're a cardiologist. How does this work with the heart? If people have a predisposed condition, I come from a family of heart disease. My father died of heart disease. If people have that predisposed disposition, is this something that can help rejuvenate the heart? Even more so, or if people have it in their history, is it something that can perhaps prevent?
Well, in my opinion, absolutely. And again, we're talking about something which is not FDA approved. But from my own experience, as a cardiologist, I started using stem cells in the frame of studies in heart patients, in particular in patients with congestive heart failure, meaning weak hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no cure so far for congestive heart failure. There's more people dying of heart diseases and heart failure in particular than all cancers combined.
Yeah.
So that's a deadly, incurable disease. And the ultima ratio option we have basically is a heart transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a transplant cardiologist, so I'm dealing with those kind of patients every day. But keep in mind, there's 6.5 million people with
Mm-hmm.
heart failure in the United States, but we do perform only 2,200 heart transplants
Wow.
a year. So there's a big gap between those who are candidates for transplantation and who are not. The ones who are not are usually older, maybe
Mm-hmm.
too old for a transplant, or they have multi-morbid
Yeah.
conditions. They have kidney failure in addition, they have COPD, you name a different condition. So we started treating these kind of patients who were not candidates for heart transplant, or were candidates, but for whatever reason
On
couldn't
a
get
huge
it.
waiting list, yes. Mm-hmm.
And with enormous results, meaning that their quality of life
Mm.
improved significantly, meaning that their cardiac capacity improved in a way that we measured, for example, using something like very simple stress kind of tests. So they were more capable of doing physical activities than before the stem cells. But we did not cure any disease. We didn't improve the weakness of their heart as measured by echocardiograms, for example. But the functional capacity was improved and the quality of life was improved. And that's what counts.
And the longevity of life itself.
Well, we haven't tested that because in order to look at mortality data, you need really large numbers of patients
Mm-hmm.
and you need a long follow-up period. And we just don't have those data yet. There's so much more research needed in the stem cell world. That's why it's not FDA approved, because we don't have enough data.
Right, right. Well, if there's the billionaires are putting the money behind it to research, then good for them. We're always looking for something that's going to help us optimize our life. We see so many other diseases today. I mean, diabetes is most certainly on the rampage, fibromyalgia, numerous amount of things that are out there. And very often we just don't understand, have they always been there? Is there, a pandemic of it in itself? Is it lifestyle? Is it the foods we're eating? Is it the stress? Is it the environment? So we're always looking for something that can help optimize our own health and give us a quality of life that very often is being robbed from us. So anything that can help us in a way to rejuvenate our own bodies instead of, something external, something that is a part of your own building structure in your own body. So that's really what you're doing. You're helping the old stem cells rejuvenate, or partner with the old stem cells to rejuvenate in order to just build the system up a lot more. So do you ever see it being something that could replace old stem cells altogether? Do you think we're going to get there?
Well, I mean, we can't really, in our lifetimes, we cannot change evolutionary processes, of course, but we can mediate certain processes in our body. We can foster some enzymatic regulations of biochemical pathways from the outside by giving cofactors or giving stem cells from the outside to basically support what the body is supposed to do. And it seems to work in many conditions. And what you mentioned earlier, I mean, why are we where we are today with regard to having more heart failure than ever before? Well, in part, keep in mind, people survive heart attacks more.
Yes.
Okay, we have technological expertise now, and we have methods in the cardiac catheterization lab to open clogged arteries if someone comes with a heart attack. So we are much better than we were 50 years ago, of course. Those kinds of things, it didn't exist at that time, actually. So people survive cardiovascular events, but on cost then of the survival is the development of chronic degenerative diseases such as heart failure. And that's why we see so many more nowadays. But besides that, of course, it's not only that. I mean, diabetes is on the rise. Obesity is on the rise. High blood pressure is on the rise. So these are all conditions which in part are caused by our lifestyles. In part, of course, they might be genetic and other factors, but the life itself, the lifestyle plays a major role. It's not only genetics.
So, I mean, is it true that by about the age of 23, we already start aging quite considerably? Could you see like the stem cell therapy being something that we take in our 20s to optimize or slow down the aging process in the future?
I mean, we had people in their 20s coming for certain conditions asking for stem cells. A typical example is sexual dysfunction for men and women. You know, and we have treated that. We have published on that to great success. Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, at this point, as you know, there's no way we can do like a broad recommendation. Everybody should get this and that therapy. Again, we're at a stage where we need more research. We need more money for research also. We need, at one time, of course, FDA approval before we can recommend any treatment. Right now, we are just testing, and we are just so impressed by the data that it's absolutely amazing. And it's not only for certain diseases like heart diseases or vascular diseases or diabetes, but as I mentioned, also for the beauty industry, the wellness, you know, feeling younger, looking more vital, of course. I mean, we see it every single day. What stem cells, they are pluripotent, meaning they have the ability to develop into any tissue. If you put them in the facial skin, they develop into skin cells. If you put them in the heart, they probably be able to develop into cardiomyocytes and so on.
So let's take the beauty industry. I mean, you know, when somebody's had Botox or collagen, you know, that fixed smile that, you know, isn't terribly becoming. So would the stem cell therapy kind of replace that in the sense that it is rejuvenating its own cells in there, working with the body? So it's less of an intrusion in the body, but more working as a partner within the body?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say it's replacing it, but keep in mind, I mean, stem cells, even though the FDA always wants to consider that as a drug, it's not a drug. It's not a medication which is manipulated. These are stem cells either from the patient's own body or now more frequently from donors, from umbilical cord, from placenta tissue, and so on, Wharton's jelly. So that's a natural compound, if you wish. That's nothing chemically fabricated. So it's natural. That's number one. Number two is the stem cells do lead to a collagen induction in the skin. So they rebuild collagen, or can help to rebuild collagen and revitalize the superficial layers of the skin by rebuilding dermatocytes, the epithelial skin cells. So theoretically, yeah, we might be able to have, I'm not saying same effects like Botox injections, but a much more natural way to revitalize the skin. Botox is a toxin, and I'm not against it, don't misunderstand me. But I mean, it's a toxin which it's a nerve toxin which basically paralyzes our facial muscles, and by thus removes to some degree wrinkles. Same with fillers. I mean, we fill in artificial materials to make wrinkles look less prominent. In contrast with what we call stem cell facial rejuvenation or um, stem cell facelifts without a knife, just with
Yes.
needles,
Yes.
we basically induce theoretically an internal rejuvenation of the skin in the clinical studies we are doing.
You know, and really, quite honestly, that is so much more natural. I mean, we're all going to age, and you know, what we want to do is look really good for our age, not try and change our age back 20, 30 years and look artificial, quite honestly. So if we can just look like we're glowing, we're looking healthy, you know, that the skin and everything is looking vibrant. It doesn't matter if you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, you know, it's all about that vibrancy of how you look, because otherwise it does look fake. I'm sorry, it does, you know. So we want to just optimize the way we look, and we really just want to look rejuvenated. We want to look like we are still current and that everything about us is still optimized. And really, that's kind of what I feel that stem therapy does. It optimizes our present condition.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, Sarah. That's the way to go, and that's where I mean, there's a movement towards that.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, and I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the book, The Secret World of Stem Cell Therapy, which just came out actually a few days ago, was of course to inform people, inform the public, the consumers, potential patients, what they should know about stem cell therapy. It's not only praising its potential, even though I do that, of course.
Yes.
But there is, of course, a dark side to it too, and that's that for certain conditions, for all conditions actually, it's unapproved, and so blindly recommending unapproved therapies has a dark side because there's a lot of business to be made,
Yes.
and there's a lot of
Yes.
black sheep out there, and they promise cures of diseases,
Yes.
and they promise whatever you want to hear, and that's just not true.
Yeah,
Stem
there'll
cells
always
have
be the
not
charlatans out
shown
there.
to cure.
Yeah.
Right, but as a consumer, we all have to know what questions to ask.
Right.
And it's very difficult. I mean, if you go on the internet, for example, and Google, let's say, stem cell therapy for something like sexual dysfunction, you find within 0.2 seconds, like 95 million hits. 99.9% of those is pure advertising. There's no
Yes.
scientific data. It's just hearsay and marketing and PR. And how, as a consumer, would you know what to believe? You cannot.
Exactly.
You can't have the capability or the experience really to distinguish what is marketing and advertising and what is facts. So that's in the book. I want to inform people, I want to educate the public to tell them, look, this is the future of medicine, no doubt. But on the other hand, don't believe what people just tell you, who have never published a paper on it, who have never participated in a clinical trial. You have to know what questions to ask, and you will be surprised what answers you get. And most of them are not very competent.
But it's also, you know, the origins of the stem cells. Where did they come from? You know, how viable are they? I mean, how many people of the charlatans, you know, kind of create something out of nothing and then con people to believe that, you know, that it is something. I mean, surely, how does one get a stem cell to work with in the first place?
Absolutely, yeah, and exactly what you mentioned, Sarah. Where do the cells come from? That's a big issue because there's many companies who sell stem cell products to physicians, and they use it. Orthopedic surgeons for the knees or the hips, plastic surgeons with their facelifts, whatever you name it. But I mean, just 3 years ago, there were 18 patients in the United States admitted to hospitals with bacterial infection, sepsis, basically, which can be life-threatening because they received stem cells from one particular company, which obviously did not follow any regulations, did not follow any hygienic measures, and those products were contaminated with E. coli.
Oh my God.
That's a problem, and that's the same problem with the medical tourism. We see
Yeah.
a lot of people who go uh, outside the country to certain places where they think, oh, they can get stem cell therapy for cheap. Well, there's no quality control. You have no idea what you are getting. You cannot really evaluate whether there's any hygienic measures in place
Yes.
to ensure the safety of those products. And that's a big issue. And a lot of people come back, then they have paid a lot of money and didn't do anything, or they come back worse in worse conditions
Right.
because of infection. So, and
Buyer beware, right?
it's a
Please do
jungle
your
out there.
research.
It's a
Yeah.
jungle out there. And the FDA, of course, tries to, for that reason, to shut all those clinics down, which is wrong on the other hand, because many of those clinics who do a good job and offer stem cell therapy, they do tell their patients, look, this is experimental. This
Mm.
is not anything which anyone approves or has recommended, but what is there to lose? You know, if you have a certain incurable disease,
Yes. Yes.
why not trying it if there's a chance? That's at least my personal opinion.
Looking to the future and eventually getting it FDA approved, how long, how much more research do you think that we're going to have before we get it FDA approved? And also, right now, it sounds like it's more the rich man's product rather than it is mainstream. Do you see it becoming part of the medical practice in everyday medicine in the future?
Well, it depends on what condition and for what in particular. So in general, if you have a new drug, for example, if you want to develop a drug for heart failure, so from the development of the drug until it's in clinical practice, that process is between 10 and 20 years now.
I know.
You need to do the basic research, the cultures, the animal experience, the clinical phase 1, 2, 3 trial, and then you get approval after you have hundreds or thousands of patient data together. And that costs 100 to 200 million dollars to
Yes.
develop one single drug.
Yeah.
So in the stem cell world, first of all, there is no big pharma behind it. There's no
Which we don't really want big pharma behind it because,
well,
yeah,
but they have the money usually to
yeah, yeah.
support research, and we don't have that. So we're dependent really on
Call
the
on
patient.
boss, our Amazon guy. Hey, he's got
Well,
it.
yeah,
Take it out of farmers' hands, please, because we know
exactly.
what happens when it
They would
gets
love
there.
to, but even they, I mean, they spend their money on basic researchers who have not much connection to the clinical
Mm,
applications, and
mhm.
there's a big gap in this country from bench to bedside, if you wish,
Yes,
between basic research of what they found in the lab and what you can do as a physician for your patient. That gap is not closed, and that, I mean, that's what we are working on,
right.
because it really doesn't help if you get fantastic lab data alone, but you can't apply it
Hmm.
to humans. And that's a big problem, because basic researcher and clinical researchers are two different species, and they oftentimes don't understand each other.
Mm.
But having said that, so I mean, yeah, it is a future, of course. There's no doubt, but there's still a way to go. How long will it take to get an approval? I would guess maybe for certain conditions, like if you use one particular stem cell product for something like a knee arthritis, that might be able to be approved within the next 5, 6 years, if there is groups who really take the time and the money and the data to produce a clinical randomized double-blind controlled study. But for conditions like heart disease or diabetes or others, in my opinion, it will take at least another 10, 20 years.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, we do have a long way to go with medicine, and there is always an answer, isn't there? It's just a question of the willingness to explore, to really dive in and try and understand it. What patients it really does work in, and what areas it really does optimize in. What is needed to optimize the actual product itself, and then of course it all goes down then to the cost and who produces it and everything else, which then kind of I feel becomes more political based rather than human life based. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been actually using stem cell therapy and really studying it?
Well, I mean, our group was among the first in the world. That's more than 20 years ago, where the first experiments we did was in experimental animals, where we used the hearts of the embryonic hearts of pregnant rats and transplanted those embryonic cells and stem cells from the embryos in the pregnant rats into recipient rats, in which we created heart attacks by occluding an artery in the heart. And so after a couple of weeks after the heart attack was created, we injected those cells into that dead heart tissue of recipient rats. And we were among the first in the world showing that after 6 months, number one, those cells were still there. They did survive. Number two, that they in part engrafted into, or implemented themselves into the host tissue and the recipient tissue, actually. And lastly, they contributed to an improvement of the cardiac function compared to placebo controls. So the reduced scar tissue and the strength of the pump strength of the heart was improved in those cells. And that was, we published that in the 80s, basically. That was like the beginning, or one of the initial steps towards the first clinical studies in patients with heart disease, and then in patients with degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And that created to that enormous hype around 2000, where several of the landmark studies, clinical studies, were published using stem cells. And we participated in some of them. And they all showed benefits. They showed benefits with regard to the blood supply to the affected organs, in particular the heart and the function. And like I said, every single study which was published, as far as I know, showed benefits. But of course, there's a lot of unanswered questions still. We don't know exactly which type is the ideal stem cell for which particular condition. We don't know the exact amount or the route of administration, and we don't know how often do we do it. In our clinical studies we are doing right now, we have a protocol for certain conditions where we do it one time and then a booster after 3 months and then again after 1 year. But I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, if we even need that booster or not. That's just one protocol. So
it's still in discovery.
All needs to be, yeah.
I mean, you talked about Alzheimer's, and again, this, dementia and Alzheimer's seems to be on the rise as well right now, and I'm not quite sure for that. But how is the stem cell therapy in helping either reverse or slow that down?
Well, again, there is some data out there from other groups. We have our own data, not published in totality yet, but everybody has seen anecdotally at least some improvements, and we are in the process of gathering our data in patients with Alzheimer, more actually in patients with ALS, but there's Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yes.
And even in patients with cerebral palsy. So these are people who are incurable. Usually they have a progressive disease which gets worse over time, and they have certain, especially mobility problems, up to complete paralysis.
Yeah.
And we have seen improvements in motion abilities and mobility. Not a cure, of course not.
Right.
I mean, I've never had someone who was in a wheelchair and who suddenly could walk. That doesn't happen, of course. But we had a patient, for example, who was very sick with ALS and was on a ventilator with a trach and in a wheelchair, and he couldn't do anything. But after stem cell therapies, he could write a book. I mean, not write it physically, but he was feeling good enough to basically be able to dictate his son a book. He was a physician, and he wrote a 1,000 page textbook in medicine in a condition which was unthinkable before. So again, what the stem cells did is, in that case, as far as we know, they didn't cure any disease. They improved, obviously, his ability to do very simple movements a little bit, and cleared his mind and improved significantly his quality of life.
And slowed it down. And of course, where the stem cell therapy can come in very, very useful is when people have got the initial diagnosis, right? If you can get the stem cell therapy into them right there, before the degeneration of that disease takes hold, and help either, I don't know if you could stop it, but most certainly slow it down, and help people with those diseases not literally go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, like I said, at this point, we're far away from saying, oh, we can cure any disease or we can stop a disease. But the studies that have been published have shown at least like a delay in the progression of the disease. Look at another example is HIV, right? I mean, over the last several years, there have been several reports on, individual reports initially, on patients who were completely cured with HIV after stem cell therapies.
Wow.
There were 3 or 4 patients published over the last couple of years. I mean, HIV is well controllable nowadays, but keep in mind, a couple of years ago, everybody who had it died.
Yes,
And
exactly.
now, I mean, we can.
Well, how do you think that that is curable as opposed to other diseases?
Well, again, I would be very careful to say it's curable, but we have heard about cases, not my patients, but published basically where there was no virus load anymore, probably because the extreme effective anti-inflammatory effects of stem cells, and they might strengthen the immune defense system in the body. So I'm not quite sure, but I mean, we hear that. We did a search in the press basically over a year. It's in the book, I think. There's almost every week there was a report in the British Daily Mail, for example, on something about stem cells, either of an anecdotal single case with cure, if you wish, more or less. There was a young gentleman at the University of Southern California who was paralyzed, and after stem cell therapy could move his arms. A picture of him lifting like a weight above his head, unthinkable without stem cells before. And there were, of course, other reports on potential risks where people went blind after someone injected some cells in the eye, which they should not have done.
Right, exactly.
And there's always a question, of course, what happens in cancer patients. So again, there's a lot of unanswered questions. So
what we know is that stem cell therapy is the way of the future, but it's still in discovery of exactly how and where to use it, how much to use it, how often to use it, and whom can take it. And obviously, if we can get it in people at the beginning of any disease, and then I could see it being something that can either reverse it or certainly slow that disease down. But it's still in that discovery of understanding exactly. I mean, when you say different stem cells, how many different stem cells are there?
Well, there's different sources. Of course, when we started initially in clinical trials, we used stem cells from adipose tissue. So from the patient, we did like a mini liposuction and got the cells from the fat tissue. Then we used bone marrow derived stem cells, where we did a bone marrow biopsy at the sternum or the iliac bone and isolated the cells from there. And there's other sources. Even the blood has some kind of stem cells. Platelet-Rich Plasma Prp, for example, is used by many orthopedic surgeons because of its anti-inflammatory effects for certain muscle or joint diseases. Nowadays, we use mainly donor cells in the clinical studies, meaning umbilical cord or placenta tissue or Walton-Shelley, which is much more potent. Of course, we can imagine something which creates a baby.
Yes.
is much more potent than the stem cells 50 or 60-year-old has in his tummy, in his belly. So those, what we call allogenic stem cells, that's even more red flag for the FDA, of course, because they are concerned about possible immune reactions. And there's a valid point to that, because I'm a transplant cardiologist and I don't want anyone receiving any blood product and then developing antibodies.
Yes.
That it doesn't matter today, but if that patient needs a heart or kidney transplant in 5 years, he might have a problem to find an appropriate organ. So for that reason, we in our lab, we have actually treated stem cells for years in a different way to basically avoid what we call angiogenesis, meaning the ability for those cells to create antibodies in the recipient. And nowadays, we are not even using stem cells anymore. We're using the ingredients of cells without the cell membranes in order to avoid the potential risk of inducing antibodies. But again, if you ask certain groups who offer stem cell therapy for a lot of money, they have no clue. They don't know what HLA type 1 and 2 antibodies even are.
Yeah, they're just capitalizing, selling a fad, and they have no accountability for it at all. I mean, how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been studying stem cells?
Over 20 years, like I said, we started with those animal studies, and then I was part of certain larger multi-center trials, and then, I mean, the change came then that there was a lot of popular news, if you wish, about the potential of stem cells, and then we had so many patients who wanted to be part of studies, but they couldn't fit in particular those with heart diseases, because they were too sick. Nobody wants to do a study with too sick patients. So we thought, well, we have to offer something else. We offer basically something else to them, which is like not a randomized clinical trial, but we tell them this is purely experimental. There's no guarantees. We are testing this basically outside the controlled clinical trials. And it's not FDA approved, it's not covered by insurances. So we have to pay for the cells, so someone has to pay for the cells, and so on. And as long as that's disclosed, I mean, we started doing it in that way. And that was then the basis for certain of the publications we did, and more to come.
Did you ever meet Dr. Chris Bernard?
No.
Nope. I did actually back in South Africa.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, his daughter and I were friends, and
oh, really?
I remember being in an elevator with him saying, "You can't have my heart." I was 14 at the time or something.
Yeah.
But was he the one to inspire you to go down this road, or what inspired you to go down, heart transplants or heart cardiology?
No, he was not the one. Of course, I knew about him, and I was inspired more by his lifestyle later on, because he was obviously like a superstar. But no, I was inspired. I never forget in the last year of medical school, which I did in Austria and Vienna and in Germany and Nigeria also. But at that time, I did like a practical period in gastroenterology, where we did the endoscopies up and down. And at that time, there were no monitors, so we had to be with a little pin at the eye directly where we looked at, and that was not very pleasant. And then the next practical semester, I had a cardiologist who was wearing a golden stethoscope. He was very arrogant. He was a famous man in Germany who wrote the textbooks on EKGs. His name was Heinecker, but I was so impressed by his golden stethoscope. I thought, I want to have that.
You never know what's going to inspire you, right? So, I mean, you've done an awful lot of presentations on various news channels and other channels to get this word out and the understanding of it out there. So thank you for doing that. But the secret world of stem cell therapy in the book, that's where you really break it down, what it is, what it can do, but also the warning signs of, the buyer beware.
Yeah, there's not much out there. I mean, if you look, there's a couple of books on stem cell therapy. There's good books from certain basic researchers, PhDs, about the biology and the pathologic mechanism and so on. But they're not clinicians. They're not treating patients. And there's a few clinical doctors who wrote something on stem cells. They don't have the scientific background, so there's nothing, in my opinion at least, I didn't see anything which covers what, in my opinion, a potential patient consumer should know. And that's why we put in the book the main clinical study data, the basic scientific background on the stem cells, what has been published, what are the facts, what does the FDA in fact really say to it at the current time, and what are the pitfalls, and what questions should you ask if you consider it, and especially don't believe what's written on the internet. I mean,
so this book is kind of written for the general public. So, you know, people don't need to have medical knowledge to understand it. So this is a guideline for people who are interested in stem cells.
It's supposed to be, yeah.
The do's and the don'ts. And of course, people can buy it from Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Google, Target, Walmart, Book Depository, Bookshop, Indigo, Powell's. You've got the book everywhere.
I guess so, yeah.
And I mean, other than obviously rescuing people's hearts and giving them hope, and I kind of wish you'd been around 50 years ago when my dad died of heart disease, because you know, that was back in 66 and there was no hope then. He was told 3 months to live. He lived 4 years. Had he changed his lifestyle, I think he would have, you know, probably stuck around a great deal longer. But instead, being a squadron leader from the war, he kind of lived his life as if it was the last battle, and he died at 45. My brother had a heart attack later on, but he immediately went into veganism and changed his lifestyle and everything else, and his heart seems to be doing okay. There's a lot that we can do for our hearts today, isn't there? But I think prevention would be far better than cure. So just before we sign off, you know, what would you suggest for people to do to have a healthy heart?
Well, the three main steps is number one, diet plays a major role, as I mentioned. Balanced, less salt, less carb, less fat, more plant-based. And there is a lot of literature now on intermittent fasting. I haven't done it myself, but I think
my kids do it. Both of my kid parties do it. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. The other thing, of course, I'm the biggest proponent for exercise.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see 50 to 100 patients every day, and I ask them of the exercise. Of course, everybody says yes, but what does it really mean? I mean, if you do like a walk in the evening, a stroll, that's a great social activity and that's good to do, but that's not exercise. Exercise means really you have to challenge your heart and your blood vessels. So you want to keep your blood vessels elastic. You want to condition your heart. If you want to do that, you have to do an exercise in a way that you have to sweat, you have to get short of breath, meaning you have to push it. A slow walk is not really enough exercise, in my opinion. You have to push it. The ideal is even something like what we call high intensity interval training, where you get your heart rate up and down and up and down. So in intervals, because those kind of exercises, they condition your heart and they keep the blood vessels elastic. And the recommendation now from the American Medical Association in general is for all of us 5 times a week, minimum of 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. If you can do more, even better.
Right.
And the other thing, of course, not to forget is sleep. You have to rest. You have to clear your mind. And I'm completely against like 10 hours sleeping, because there's even data in cancer patients, even in heart patients, if you sleep more than 8 hours, then you die earlier. So
really?
Don't sleep.
Is that across the board sleep, or is that deep sleep?
No, that's across the board. I mean, there's small studies, of course, but I mean, if you sleep too much, it's not good. But you have to have a healthy sleep pattern, you know, so you have to be relaxed. You cannot just, and I blame myself, I'm working nonstop basically, but I mean, that's not a good thing. I mean, you have to have resting places, you have to have a healthy sleep pattern, you have to have time to relax. I'm the biggest fan of meditation, even though I personally don't know how to do it. But
meditation can be done, doesn't have to be cross-legged doing harm. It can literally be that walk in nature, or just tuning out from your mind, right? And doing something else.
These are things which really affect our well-being and our health.
Keep that stress level down, right? Yeah, because that stress is, you know, stress and anxiety are killers, because they will ignite all those other diseases in your body and just don't give them a chance. So, you know, a lot of it is just like, let's chill out a bit, folks. Find something that's going to bring up the happy zone, right? And keep your heart healthy. thank you so much for sharing here today. Now, how do people get hold of you? Can you share your site and anything else you've
we
got
have
there?
the easiest is always through the website. It's drvonschwarz.com,
Can you, yes,
drvonschwarz.com.
if you can spell that, please, for the people who are
Yeah,
just listening.
it's drvonschwarz.com, or just Google me and you find it, Ernst von Schwarz or Dr. Ernst von Schwarz. And same with the YouTube channel. Someone asked me about the link. Honestly, I don't even know the link. But if you go on YouTube and type in Dr. Ernst von Schwarz, you'll find it. We have quite a bit of educational videos there and news reports, not only on stem cells, but also on COVID and other acute cardiovascular issues, whatever comes up actually in the news.
What was your opinion on COVID?
Well, I'm the biggest proponent for vaccinations because I have, during the high phases of COVID, I personally had to sign more death certificates within 2 months than I have ever had to sign in my entire professional career before.
Is this because people with heart disease got the COVID?
No, because people who could have been vaccinated were not vaccinated.
Right.
And died, and not only those elderly with heart diseases, but across the spectrum. The last one I saw was a 35-year-old healthy young lady who died of COVID, was not vaccinated. So, I mean, fortunately, knock on wood, it's we hardly see any COVID patients right now in the hospitals I'm going. I have one right now, actually, out of 40 or 50 hospitalized patients. But I mean, at times, of course, we had like 100 patients per day in between 2 or 3 hospitals, which I followed personally every single day. And a large proportion of those at the height died, and not all of them had underlying cardiovascular or pulmonary diseases. So it was a disaster. I think we are over it, but we are not done with it.
Right. Yeah, the variant of the variant is going to be kind of like a flu symptom that's going to go on and on and on, right?
I think so. And now we have the monkeypox, right? So
what's
Belgium,
next?
for example, has just created, as the first country in the world, in Europe, a quarantine. That's coming here very soon. And in autumn, we'll possibly have another wave of COVID with another variant.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, obviously keep those support vaccines up and use common sense. And, you know, one of the things that we do know is if you are vulnerable or going into a vulnerable place, mask up, wash the goddamn hands. You know, some of the things are just logical, right? So, and get vaccinated. So yes, there's a lot of controversy. I know so many people who are so against it and think it's a government thing. And it's sad to see that, but you know, it's
most of the anti-vaxxers or the anti-maskers even,
yes.
I mean, they have zero medical background, not everybody, but many of them have zero medical background or any scientific reputation or experience, really. I mean, you have to look at the medical facts, and there are certain facts which clearly support that masks, for example, do prevent the spread of diseases, not only COVID, others too.
The common cold, for instance.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, vaccines are effective, and of course there's side effects possible. However, if you look at the real numbers, I mean, it's very low compared to the potential benefits. I'm not saying blindly one should follow everything which someone says, but I mean, here we are talking about really medical scientific facts. And
that was global, not just in one country with an agenda. Right. This was global scientists saying this, you know, so are they all fake? You know, this is, you know, at some point we just need to kind of look at things for really what it is and not buy really into the hysteria. So if there's preventative out there, folks, that's what you want to do, right?
I agree.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Again, it's Dr. von Schwarz, Dr. drvonschwarz selfdiscoverymedia.com. Go to his site. His YouTube channel is the same. He has a health blog. He's on LinkedIn. He's on Instagram. Look at some of the other shows that he's done and interviews that he's done where he talks about it. We are still in discovery with the stem cell. It will be the way of the future in the future. But whatever we can do that can optimize someone's health, give people some longevity, anything that we can do to rejuvenate our bodies in any way, we need to get behind, because ideally we would love prevention better than cure. But if we need something that's also going to help the cure down the road, that's where the investment needs to be. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Folks, remember, your health is your choice. Plant-based diet is very, very good. Rest, exercise, a lot of the common denominators that you need to do. So until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or self-discovery-media/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations, or follow us on Patreon and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom. And the next show will be up in just a moment.